like to bring the meeting to order for the Planning Board for October 16th. We have a very light agenda. We have a presentation here this evening. First, I would like to take one item out of order, and that would be look for a motion to postpone the site plan review and special permit for 672 Suffolk Street to a special meeting that we have scheduled for Thursday, October 19th at 6:30 in the Mayor's Reception Room. Could I have a motion for that, please?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, make a motion to postpone the special permit for the site plan review and special permit for 672 Suffolk Street until Thursday evening.
Thank you. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And we have some special guests this evening. We have some members from some of the other land use boards as well here. For our presentation, we have Philip Germano from the Zoning Board of Appeals, Sean Callahan from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and Luis Savanam from the Conservation Commission. With that, we'll be hearing a presentation from Jay Donovan, the Assistant Director of Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, and Stephanie Cronin is the Executive Director of the Middlesex 3 Coalition. We will hear a presentation by NEMCOG on in the Middlesex 3 Coalition on the permitting practices and procedures of each of the Middlesex 3 communities in the Massachusetts permitting best practices. Welcome and thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you for having us this evening and for your time. So I'm Stephanie Cronin. I'm the Executive Director of the Middlesex 3 Coalition. And for those of you who don't know, the Middlesex 3 Coalition, we are a regional economic development organization. We include 9 communities along the Route 3 corridor, which includes obviously the city of Lowell, Chelmsford, Billerica, Bedford, Burlington, Westford, Lexington, Tewksbury, and Tingsboro. And we are a membership-based organization. We've grown over the last 5 years. We now include 80 companies along the Route 3 corridor. These are the larger businesses along the Route 3 corridor. We're not a chamber. We're not trying to compete with the chambers. They're great. They do a great job. What we try to do is we try to address those larger business development concerns that are difficult for one community or one company to address on their own. Transportation is our biggest challenge that we hear from the companies, the biggest concern. We also work with workforce development issues, make certain we have the educated workforce that we need. We work with utilities, permitting, healthcare, both cost and access, real estate development, and really just promoting, marketing, branding the Route 3 corridor for businesses to come to the area, working with your economic development staff, of course. So over the last few years, we've done a number of initiatives to try to address many of these issues, and I can certainly talk about that later. I think you have a light agenda now. But we're here today to talk about permitting. And my role is primarily to introduce Jay Donovan from the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, who most of you probably already know anyway. But it was NEMCOG and the planning directors that created this matrix that's in front of you tonight. Our role at the Middlesex 3 Coalition is really that of a facilitator to bring together the planning directors and to share best practices. We know that commercial real estate developers, brokers, work in different communities along the Route 3 corridors. They go from community to community, and they see the differences in the planning and the permitting practices and procedures. So what we want to do is we want to make certain that the municipalities have the same information. So over the last few years, we've been working with NEMCOG and the planning directors to put together this permitting matrix, which compares the permitting best practices that the state established. And I know Jay will get into more details, but it compares the permitting best practices among the 9 communities. And the hope is that every community, primarily the planning boards, can benefit and can walk away with ideas, knowledge, ways to improve the permitting in your individual community. I'd like to tell one story where, I don't know if it was Bedford or Burlington, one of the community's planning members came up to me and said, we were looking to do XYZ, I forget what it was, and we didn't think we could do it. But then when we looked at the matrix and we saw that our neighbors were doing it, we realized that we were able to do it as well too. And that's really what we're trying to do, is just trying to encourage that conversation and those best practices. And this matrix is being funded through the DLTA grant with NEMCOG, and part of that grant includes recommendations. So we've asked NEMCOG at the end of this whole process to put together a number of recommendations for each community on ways that you could improve your individual best permitting practices. And part of the background is really it's marketing, and we want to market this area. And we know we don't have to do anything to really market it as permit friendly, because all of our 9 communities have professional staffs. They can all approve permits in X number of days. But what we wanted to do is to make some real changes. And so we think this is the first time where we've taken a regional approach in Massachusetts to say, how can we improve the permitting for the entire region? So I think hopefully this will be useful. I want to close by thanking your staffs. You've got some great people working for the city. They're wonderful to work with, so I thank you for that. And I will hand it over to Jay Donovan. Thank you.
Good evening. Just basically provide a general introduction first. Many of you may have seen this document before, which is best practices model for streamlined local permitting. It was done during the Patrick administration in November 2007. The Massachusetts Association of Regional Planning Agencies worked with the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development to see what it was that they could do to improve the permitting practices across the state, because they felt with a smoother permitting practice out there, it would help attract more private investment to the state. But this document still remains the most recent document on streamlined permitting. So it talks about improving the relationship between permitting boards and developers, so that the developers know what each board is looking for, and that the developers are then able to provide the material that you need to make your decision as you go through the process. So they basically broke down the permitting best practices into 4 categories: improving communication with permit applicants, standardizing the permitting process, resources for improved local permitting performance, and planning. So, as Stephanie mentioned, 3 years ago, Middlesex 3 Coalition met with the community development directors and planners to develop a matrix. And this matrix provides their own self-assessment of how they think the process works. So in our presentations to some of the other communities so far, we found that there were some differences between what the staff thought and what the board members actually thought, which was enlightening. So we're trying to work with each community, get your feedback in terms of what you feel is right about the matrix or wrong about the matrix in terms of what's here, and also to give you an opportunity to see what other communities in the Middlesex 3 Coalition are doing, and to be able to reach out to the other communities in areas where you feel that you can improve the practice in terms of what you're doing, and you're able to go to another community that's already done that. So as Stephanie mentioned, based on your feedback, we will develop a report by the end of this year for the Middlesex 3 Coalition, and they will share it with the communities in terms of the process. So in terms of going through the process, we'll go through each one of the best practices that are there. It's a little hard for me to see the screen from here, but I think most people have copies of it in front of you. First one, best practice, was single point of contact. You have that here in Lowell. A single point of contact for permitting is the Department of Developmental Services. So in some communities, developers don't know where to go, whether it's the building inspector or the planner or whomever. So one of the best practice recommendations was that there be a single point of contact. In terms of a user's guide to local planning, Lowell does not have a local permitting guide. There are other communities that have that in place, and they actually put it on their website so the developers can see it ahead of time. Town of Billerica, for instance, has a document like that. and we were able to use our district local technical assistance funds from the state in order to pull it together. So that's an option going down the road, working with the city of Lowell. We could work with you to help develop that user's guide. In terms of permitting flow charts and checklists, the assertion here is that you have checklists for ZBA and for the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission, plus building permits, but I'm not sure if you have flow charts. Do you know if you have flow charts or no flow charts? So there's nothing outlining the steps that somebody needs to take in order to go through the process. In terms of the career submittal requirements, to help uniform the review process, you believe, your staff believes that you have clear submittal requirements. You might get a difference of opinion on developers from time to time, but I'm sure that's something that you can work out. It works to have as clear submittal requirements as possible so that you and the prospective applicant are on the same page in terms of what you need. Concurrent application submissions. It says here that your projects, this happens with your ZBA and Planning Board approval. I don't know if that also happens with the Conservation Commission in terms of coordinating your efforts. Combined public hearings. The answer to response here was no. Combined public hearings provide a problem for local communities in terms of trying to meet on an off night or a different night from what you're used to meeting on. So I'm not sure that's one of the top priorities in terms of best practices. Pre-application process. Some communities actually have a development committee set up that they meet with the developer ahead of time. They go over, they have the project presented to them, and they're able to identify for the respective boards what the problem areas are going to be and what they're going to need to address. And it's a good way for the staff to work together and to see where the problem areas are going to be in terms of the approval process, whether it's in the Conservation Commission or through the Planning Board. The project review team, the question here was whether there are regular meetings, and the response was they meet as required. So some communities actually have regular meetings, technical meetings, like every 2 weeks or so, in which they meet. Again, if they don't have anything on their agenda, they just postpone the meeting. The interdepartmental meetings, City of Lowell has a process whereby they bring everybody into the process, different departments, depending on the nature of the project, whether they're public safety issues that the police and fire department have to address, or what some of the engineering and water and sewer issues are. So there's always been a long history here of bringing the different departments in. In terms of physical proximity of staff, in a lot of communities, they're in 3 or 4 different buildings, and it makes it difficult to do that. But all your permitting personnel are here in City Hall, so that makes it a lot easier in terms of working together. The development agreements, a lot of the suburban communities don't have development agreements. Development agreements offer you flexibility, and they also offer you an opportunity to be on the same page with the developer in terms of knowing what the responsibilities of each party are. Lowell has used that with the Hamlet Canal District, and so it's something that you're used to doing, and I think you're well ahead of the rest of the region in terms of utilizing them. In terms of the use of third-party consultants, Lowell has a larger staff than most of the suburban communities, but you also see the value of third-party consultants in terms of special studies, whether it has to be with cell towers or economic impact studies or whatever else. In terms of the objective criteria for special permits, the requirements here are governed by your zoning ordinance, the criteria in zoning ordinance. And I guess whether they're objective or not is in the eye of the beholder in terms of what's there. In terms of site plan approval, you focus on buildings over 10,000 square feet, three or more units of housing, self-service gas stations, or drive-through establishments. A lot of communities have a two-tier assessment process whereby for the smaller type projects, they have a certain level of need to go through the process, whereas they don't want to put the smaller applicants have to go through the process of some of the larger firms. You might have something like that here in effect, that you'd hold a large business feet to the fire more in terms of a lot of different issues than you would a local business person just trying to get a use permit. In terms of delegating more decisions to staff, you already have a system in place here where the staff approves minor changes to what you do, so you don't have to wait 2 weeks or 4 weeks for your next meeting to get the boards to approve it. In terms of uniform timelines, notification and appeals, your meeting schedules, submission deadlines are made public. The question is, how available are they? Are they regularly on your website for each one of your boards in terms of what needs to be done there? I know you have your agendas and you have your meeting minutes on there. In terms of adequate staffing, this is one that's always gotten different responses. Most communities say there's not enough adequate staff, and your staff says they don't know of any permitting department that would say they have enough staff. In terms of training, you have training here, and I guess the question is whether or not that training is made available for both board members and staff members. In a lot of communities, it's principally made available to staff members, and yet there's some training that's available out there for different board members, whether it's with ZBA in terms of dealing with Chapter 43D or with the Planning Board or Conservation Commission. Would be glad to help provide you with information on that, should any of your board members like some of that information in terms of what might be available, particularly for new board members coming on that aren't familiar with the process.
Jay, I just will say, it was several years ago, and probably would be a good idea to do it again, but we had actually the community, the citizen planner program come in, and we had invited all the board members, and also we invited the neighborhood group leaders to sit in, because, I mean, they're coming before us for projects, and it's important for them to understand zoning and the process, and it helps their view of the process and understanding what the issues are. And it's been quite a few years, and we actually taped them so that when we had new board members, we were providing that to them, but that's been quite a few years. I don't know.
But that's something we could do again next year if you're interested in doing something similar to that.
No.
The citizens planning training that we're having this year are on master plans and on marijuana.
Right, yeah.
In terms of regulations related to marijuana. So,
No, I think I'm all for that. I think more communities should be doing that. And I like the idea of including, neighborhood group leaders, because that's a big part of the city of Lowell as well. So.
Well, we'd be very happy to sponsor that and work with you on that. In terms of maximizing reach of municipal website, the website provides a way for for applicants for permits to know ahead of time what they need to make available and who to see and that whole process. The more you're able to put that on your website, the better off you are. The less time it then takes the staff having to deal with people who come in here and go through the process. We had worked on this economic development self-assessment tool with Professor Barry Bluestone at Northeastern, with mostly our suburban communities. And the major thing he said was most developers or private investors, the first thing they look at is your website. And if they can't get information on the website, then they'll just go on to another community. They won't even think twice about that. So he thought that having a website there and having a process where there was some certainty in terms of the permitting process, it doesn't mean that they're always going to be approved or anything else, but they know what the time frame is going to be, that's more beneficial than any economic incentive that any community could provide. So it's a type of thing that you have control over, and that you can upgrade your overall permitting practices by making more extensive use of your website. Electronic permit tracking system. You reference munis in terms of building permits, but that's not what was really talked about here. Westford has a tracking system that they have. They have a building permit tracker, and they also have a way for applicants to put applications online in terms of doing that, and they're moving more toward that process. In terms of your electronic filing process, it accepts your PDF format, but does not have online applications that can be filled out. It might be something that you can learn from some of the other communities in terms of how to do that and get an estimate of what the cost might be, and as you transition over the next 2 or 3 years in terms of looking at your permitting process. In terms of selecting preferred sites for commercial industrial development, it says here not applicable, but for the most part, Lowell identifies its commercial industrial sites for development. There's a reading list that the Community Development Department provides, so most developers would have an idea of what's available, or it would help to have that information on your website if you could, so that they'd be able to, private investors could take a look at that as well. In terms of designated priority development sites in Chapter 43D, you've used that program as you've used all the state programs, all the state development programs, whether it be with the TIFs or any of the other types of programs. So City of Lowell has been actively involved in all the state programs, development programs. So in terms of permitting sites, you have Mass Bio-Ready Platinum status, and you've also, through your form-based code in the Hamilton Canal District, you have pre-permitting in that sort of thing. The Patrick administration wanted to get communities just to pre-permit sites across the board, so it would already be pre-permitted, and developer could move ahead on it. And that was largely foreign to most local communities in terms of being able to do it. They're most used to having a developer come in and ask for the requisite permits for the development. So this is just a basic outline of how your staff responded to those questions. You can compare them across the board with some of the other communities. Again, it's a self-assessment. NIMCOG didn't do anything in terms of trying to standardize responses. We're generally familiar with the permitting practices in our 6 communities here, but we're not as familiar with what they do in Bedford and Burlington and Lexington in terms of their overall process.
Now, Jay, my understanding, there's going to be a recommendation at the completion of this, or how?
Right, you would, the recommendation, have a brief report outlining what we're able to find through these presentations, offer recommendations how each community can build upon its permitting practices and improve its permitting practices.
And when do you anticipate the completion of this study and recommendation?
Of the report, end of the year,
End of the year?
December 31st.
Okay.
We have two more presentations to make on Thursday, doing a presentation in Burlington, and in the second week of November, we're doing our final presentation in Billerica.
So have you made a presentation in each one of these communities?
Yes.
Oh, okay, very
Yep.
good, good, very good.
So I think we started in April. So,
Anything eye-opening or that surprised you in the gathering of the data, just out of curiosity?
sometimes I find that a staff's assessment of what's actually going on is different from my perception of what's going on in that community, or from what we've heard from developers or from other people.
Right.
So, and in some cases, in Lexington, for instance, there was a debate between the planning board members and the staff person in terms of what he had put down and what was actually their sense of what was happening. Well, we had offered, I mean, I think that was back in May or so, but we had offered them an opportunity to provide feedback. We still haven't heard from those planning board members in terms of what they might change or anything else.
So that's a useful exercise for the community too, because sometimes there is a disconnect. So you can highlight that and then they can address it, so, good. Very good. Anything else that you'd like to?
I have nothing else at this time. I don't know if any of the members of your zoning board of appeals or conservation commission or your planning board members, any questions they might have?
Oh, Louisa.
I just wondered how the better effectiveness of the permitting process sort of behind the scenes would affect public input. Are more decisions being essentially made before the public has a chance to weigh in on what they think?
Well, the intent here is not to keep the public out of the process. The intent is just make it smoother in terms of the permitting process, to be able to identify ahead of time what's required by the boards, and then to have the boards do their due diligence on different projects. So it's, to make it go smoother doesn't mean you're leaving the public out of the process. There's still time for them to participate and offer their comments on projects and their concerns about what the impact is on their neighborhood. It's just a matter of, I mean, developers are used to going through this process, so, and they know that they're going to have concerns. It's just a matter of trying to be a more friendly place in terms of smoother process, in terms of they know what the expectations are in terms of how much time it's going to take to get through the approval process.
The public sometimes feels that a pre-application process, for instance, is guiding the project into certain channels before there's a chance for public input.
I can understand how they might feel that way, but I think pre-application process just provides a way for staff to be better educated in terms of how to deal with the project and how to identify what the problems are that need to be addressed. And that, I think they'd be better off in terms of being able to address concerns from the neighbors in terms of they knew more about the project ahead of time.
Thank you. Jordan?
Can we anticipate, based on this presentation, that your suggestion report will include ways that Lowell specifically can better utilize its website to fast-track the planning and permitting process?
Yes, We will outline some recommendations along those lines, and we'll try to identify what some other communities have done that you could implement fairly easily without a lot of cost. And to do that, there are limited resources here. The District Local Technical Assistance Fund only provides like $194,000 per year for NIMCOG for the whole region. So we will do a report, and as I mentioned before, we'll be glad to follow up with the city for next year if they want to put in an application for DLTA funds to focus on some areas to improve their permitting process.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Rich, do you have any questions?
I have one question, and it's relating to, on the front page, item number 6, about combined public hearings. Under Lowell, you have a no, and I don't know, I just question where you got that information. We don't have them very often, but we have the capability of, like, meeting with the zoning board on, depending on the project, and we have in the past. We haven't done that a lot, but
So you think that should be changed?
I think it should be.
Okay.
I mean, we can do that depending on the project and the timeline and the, you know, the needs of the developer.
I would just add what Lexington had on there, rare in parentheses. because
Yeah, and it is. We don't do them very often. I just remember one, I can't remember the subject, but,
Well, I remember the joint hearing with the city council.
and the one with, maybe it was the city
Yeah,
council,
yeah,
I'm thinking,
remember
of,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
So whatever's necessary to
Yeah, we'll
things
make that change.
move along. Yeah, that's all I have.
That's fine. Thank you for your input.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, my name is Philip Chamina. I see you, there was a mention about lack of transportation in the developing areas. So can you or she kind of elaborate on that?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think she mentioned about lack of transportation.
Oh, public transportation?
Yeah.
Sure.
So do you mean like,
I don't know how long you want me to go on for this, but I can talk a while for it. But, so we were established to work with the business community in the area. And what we heard from the businesses is that it's often hard to get their workers to the place of business. So one thing we did was we created what's called the Transportation Management Association. And what that does is it provides businesses resources. For example, we have shuttles that go from Boston and Cambridge up to the Route 3 corridor. It provides carpools, van pools, emergency ride-home programs, those types of resources to help fill in the gap. We're not trying to compete with the LRTA. We're trying to work with them to fill in the gaps where they don't service. We're working right now with the city manager and the town managers in the Burlington-Bedford area to bring a shuttle service between Lowell and the Burlington-Bedford area. The problem is that in Burlington and Bedford, they have about 600 job openings in retail and restaurants, and they can't find people to work there. And because LRTA, they'll go down there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but they won't come back home at 10 o'clock at night. A lot of people from Lowell can't get home if they work there. So we're trying, and we've been working to try to get a shuttle that can help service these restaurants and retail businesses. So it's those types of initiatives that we're working on. We're working with NEMCOG and MAPC and CPTS on creating a more cohesive service between the Lowell area and the Burlington-Bedford, the southern part of the corridor. So we're trying to move that issue forward.
okay, thank you.
Sean?
Yes, thanks. I had a quick question, well, actually, kind of a, not really a concern mostly, but one thing really interests me is the fact of having the public informed about the process and how things go. And I know you should put in a projected users guide for publics to look at. And I'm actually kind of surprised that most of the communities in the in the corridor don't have something like that. In what you've done so far and in your research you've had, I mean, has there been like some similarities that you find that maybe you could have like a standard user's guide is for people, the public to be, informed, like here's what the process, how it normally goes. I know each community is different in how things go, but is that something that's you'd be able to compile or recommend? Because I think that would be a good idea just to give something. I think one mentioned a small business guide. Bedford has a small business guide, something for the public that just kind of give them an idea, like here's how planning works, here's how zoning works, here's how the whole process works. Is that something that you would be looking to possibly
Well,
do?
we could share a copy of the Billerica permitting guide, which is what they put on their website, as something for you to take a look at. Obviously, their situation is a little different from Lowell's in terms of between a suburban community and a city in terms of the process, but it give you an idea how you can set it up. And we actually worked with 4 or 5 of our suburban communities initially. This was about 8 or 9 years ago, doing some of the initial stuff and having that on there. So Billerica took it a bit further. They did this permitting handbook, and then they just put it on their website so people can see it ahead of time. And in fact, it was just their new economic development planner updated it last year from what it was 5 or 6 years ago. So it's more consistent.
Okay. But I mean, yeah, I think that would be a good idea, and especially even for some, for like the city, if when they would take what Barica's got, but I mean, I know we're all different.
Yep.
But one thing is, I like to see that, especially the public, who aren't represented by council, who come before, at least from the zoning board's perspective, and
Yep.
don't really have an idea of what they're facing, what they're getting into, or what the process is. But something, I guess, a layman's guide or something to that effect, like you said, that would keep that. And also, one thing I do, I'm kind of surprised that we don't have too is, and I do like, we have everything else, and the flow chart thing, seems like to be a good idea and something that I think the city should have too, because there's been many times in the zoning board, at least, that we've got matters that have gone before the planning board first, then come before us the following week, but the planning board didn't do anything.
Right.
And they're coming before us, and we have to keep continuing it out and out, because like you're right, I think it streamlines that process to, again, with the public being informed as to how plans flow through the land use system. So, but other than that, I mean, I like the presentation. I'll be looking forward to seeing what your recommendations are. So,
Well, I can provide copies of that permitting handbook to the planning board. You can distribute it to your fellow boards. And also, I can send you a copy of the actual permitting guide that gives you an idea. Understand it's 10 years old at this point, but it gives you the background for understanding why they think it's important in terms of best practices for streamlining your permitting.
thank you.
That would be helpful, Jay, that permanent guide.
Pardon me?
That would be helpful. I think I received that
Yep.
10 years ago, but yeah, no, it'd be great if you could recirculate that. I think that'd be good.
We had one planner who was throwing out his copy of the permitting guide, when we started this process. I said, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "Well, it's old." I said, "Well, yeah, but there's nothing's been developed to replace it. It's the best guide you have in terms of taking a look at that."
Right. Good.
So,
Anything to add at all?
no, I
Anybody,
just want to thank you for the opportunity to come before you.
Appreciate you coming before us, and I will say I'm obviously familiar with NEMCOG's work that you do in the communities, and it's. I wish the general public would even understand a little bit more what NEMCOG does, but I'll say that all of the communities that are members benefit from the professional staff that you have at NEMCOG and what you offer the community. So certainly want to thank you for that. Not as familiar with the Middlesex 3 Coalition, but obviously it's very important. Regional transportation and regional business development is actually it's vital for the success, economic success of the people that actually live in our region. So again, thank you both for making a presentation here this evening.
Well, I hope to offer you a new Rourke Bridge in 5 years.
I made an announcement here, Jay, that we were going to get it in 10 years, and that was 5 years ago. The bridge, yes.
Has to be the bridge, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mo.
Right.
And I just, I would like to thank the members from the Zoning Board of Appeals and Louise Savannah from Conservation Commission for joining us this evening. We are short 3 board members that were ill this evening, so we certainly hope they recover. We understand that hopefully we'll have a quorum Thursday evening. And as a reminder that we did postpone the public hearing for the site plan review and special permit for 672 Suffolk Street to Thursday, October 19th in the mayor's reception room at 6:30. So any interested parties in that hearing should be here on Thursday evening, the 19th, in the mayor's reception room at 6:30. Anybody have any announcements from any boards they serve on?
I'll hold.
No? Okay. All right, with none, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
A second?
Second.
Thank you. Vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Yeah, that's the quickest meeting we've ever had.
But really interesting stuff.
Oh, that is.